Here is what drives me. I came to Christ in college. I was a junior in college when Jesus captured my heart. He captured my heart first because I thought to myself how different my life would have been if I'd have met him sooner. How different my mom's life would have been if she had met him sooner. He captured my heart. But then he captured my mind with a vision. His vision is stated in the Lord's Prayer. He said, this then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It was years later that I came across Revelation 7 and verse 9, where this is a vision of heaven. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And what hit me was, Jesus knew what heaven looks like, and he wants that here. Now here's the other thing I recognized. People who find reasons to not interact meaningfully with other people based on physical differences are not fulfilling the kingdom vision. So we moved to Atlanta in 1997. I'm thinking to myself, man, this is going to be awesome. You know, we're moving to Atlanta, right? You know, man, this is King's home. You know, we're going to have a great racial conversation. I get to this church. I show up. We're all excited to meet in this church. I'm imagining, you know, we're going to have a really cultural experience. And this place is 93% Caucasian, wrapped in my color skin. So the very first question I ever asked the elders of this church was this question. Are you primarily white on purpose, or do you just not know how to reach out to people that are not white? Now bear in mind, the answer to that is a big answer, is it not? The answer is a big answer. So they said to me, we don't know how to reach out to people who are not white. And they were right, and they stayed true, because my next question was, if we could work on that together, would you? Yes. And we went to work on that 18 years ago. Now what I've seen now is I see a church every Sunday morning. I get to be a part of a church, this black, white, tan, every Sunday morning. Last fall, in October, we ordained our first shepherd for whom English is a work in progress. Another one of our elders translates for him to help shepherd our church. As I look around at what's happening in our church, what I began to recognize was we really are becoming something that God was looking for. A group of people who cannot take things for granted. We've got to have conversations if we're going to get to know each other. So one of the things I want to ask you tonight is this question. Which is better, colorblind or colorful? Now, I'm gonna share something with you, and this might be an asterisk, okay? I do believe that colorblind is an okay first step. Meaning, if colorblind kind of ratchets down the acrimonious relationship that people have with each other, okay, that's an okay first step. Better that than nothing. But you understand that inherent in colorblind means that if I notice your color, it will go badly. Why else would I have to be colorblind? When was the last time you walked through a rose garden and thought to yourself, oh my goodness, I hate this. Red, yellow, pink. Or weren't you fascinated with the color? You see, if I say to you, noticing your color will make it go badly, so I'm actually not going to notice your color, that says there's something about you I don't want to notice. Why? How is it possible that I'd have to know you less to love you more? Now, think about what you know about Jesus so far. Does that sound like him? I got to know you less to love you more? I really need to pay less attention to who you are so I'll feel better about being around you. How many of you think that's kind of the Jesus way, or that that's not the Jesus way? The way I hear Jesus is, oh, no. Truthfully, I actually know everything about you. And some of you are like, that is the scariest thing about my relationship with Jesus. Not with him. Because see, to him, the more I know you, the more I love you. So at home, we've challenged our church to say, how about, I love you and I want to know you. Not, I have to know you less to love you more. So I believe God's way is the colorful way. For tonight, for this evening, I'm going to use the word white to denote Americans who are of European descent. I'm going to use for this evening, only for this evening, I'm going to use the word black to denote Americans who are of sub-Saharan African descent. What do these parameters mean? I will need you to be flexible and gracious in your listening, okay? Do I understand that not everybody who is of a darker color is from sub-Saharan Africa? Shake your head, yes, no, or maybe. Yes, I understand that. Do I understand that not everybody light-skinned is from Europe? Yes. But we have to figure out a way to have a conversation in less than an hour. All right? For those of you who are of neither of those descents, I will need you to work with me tonight to do a little bit of extra translating to be able to say, okay, the principles still apply. Can you help me with that? Ladies, do I understand that there is a whole nother issue about privilege and dominance that we won't be dealing with tonight? Yes. So do you feel what we're working on? You okay? We have to have enough parameters to get something done. So does everybody understand where? Okay, all right. And you're going to help me, right? You're a good group. Okay, let's do this. So what is privilege? Let's work on this. What is privilege? You can take notes on this? Tell me what you got. Photographic memory? Come on, I've been preparing this my whole life. I'm like 55. I put 55 years in and you're not going to take notes. Come on, all right? What is access? Write this down. It's a status that enables access. Privilege is a status that enables access. All right? I don't mind if you take your phones out and work on it and check Facebook at the same time. It's all good, all right? But I want you to pay attention to this. Don't miss this. In fact, let's say it out loud together. The privilege is a status that enables access. Everybody together on this? So when someone says, I don't like it, in fact, I hate it. I think it's communist when you talk about white privilege. I think it's Marxist when you talk about white privilege. Only the liberals talk about white privilege. Can you take this definition? Yeah, I've been doing my homework. Can you take this definition? It is status that enables access. So how does one achieve access? How does one achieve the access privilege offers? How does this work? Well, number one, it can be personal achievement. Well, let me show you what I'm talking about. So, you worked hard in school, you got good grades in high school. How many of you were in any of Amy's classes today? I graduated from high school with a 1.9 grade point average. Oh, come on, no congratulations on this. I got out. A guy named Richard got 1.8, bottom of the class. I was up from 1, right? Okay, so the reality is, I had a son, one of our sons, graduated from high school with a 4.37 on a 4-point scale. He was 8th in his class. 8th in his class at a 4.37. But he earned a full ride scholarship. So one of the ways that you get access and privilege is by personal achievement. That is true. But another way is by systematic conferring. Think royal family England. Right? Them babies being born over there, I promise you, if you were born inside Buckingham Palace, it looks a whole lot different if you're born on the other side of Hyde Park. Do you get what I'm saying? It is systematic. Those of you that have studied Indian culture and so on, you follow where I'm coming from? So systematically, you're born a certain way, and that's how it goes. So some of it's personal achievement, some of it is systematic conferring. Here's the next thing. Can the same culture have a mixture of privilege? So could American culture have both? To where sometimes your status is based on achievement, and sometimes it's based on the systemic or the system. I want you to write down a word that will not be on the screen, but I think this will help us. The word is intersectionality. Think intersection, intersection, intersectionality. Privilege, some people are privileged in some ways, but not in others. So you can have citizenship, and that's a privilege, but your color may not be a privilege. You can have citizenship and color, but gender may not be your privilege. You can have citizenship, color, and gender, but not be able-bodied. You can have citizenship, color, gender, able-bodied, and be in poverty. You get the feel here? So, in privilege, some things may privilege you, and some things may not. Which also means that a lot of those things are the way you were born, or things that other people do to you. So, privilege is a mixture of experiences. Question, is all privilege good? Is all privilege good? Now think about that. Some of you shaking your head yes, some of you shaking your head no, some of you shaking your head maybe. Now seriously, how many of you ever looked at somebody and thought they've had too much privilege? Okay, why? Well, we look at their character, we look at their decisions, how they treat other people, and what are we thinking? That is not good. Agreed? Okay, here's my next question. Is all privilege bad? Not necessarily. I mean, I'm thinking to myself that it might be a possibility that if I did not work hard in school, I might not be the best neurosurgeon. Because there might be a connection between working hard in school and being a good neurosurgeon. I mean, there might be a possibility, right? And there are very few superstar athletes who are just so gifted that they don't have to work out. So not all privilege is good, not all privilege is bad. But what about this? And I want you to think about this. Is all privilege beneficial? Could privilege actually hurt people? My next question is, what metrics would you use to measure the benefits or detriments of privilege? How do you know if it's good or if it's bad? So I want to come back and look at this for a moment. Privilege as a status that enables access. The way that we as humans explain ourselves is with words and images. Right? We have an experience, so we search for words is one way, or images. Another way is to use word images, or we call them word pictures. So that's what I want to do tonight. So here's the first one. This is James Meredith, all right? There in the center. James Meredith is a fascinating story. Now, James Meredith's story is an older story. In fact, James Meredith is in his 80s. He's 82 years old. He lives in Mississippi. But his story came to life last year when on the campus of the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, which right now is number 3 in college football, right? On the campus of Ole Miss, some kids from Georgia, some students, put a noose around the neck of his statue, and then from the noose hung a Confederate flag. Now that's 2014. So I just want to make sure we're talking about up-to-date stuff, right? But here's what's fascinating. The story of James Meredith. James Meredith grew up in Mississippi, was a 9-year veteran in the U.S. Air Force. Now, how many of you think that if someone serves valiantly, bravely, honorably in the military, they ought to get a shot at education? So 9 years he serves in the U.S. Air Force. He comes out of the Air Force. He goes to Jackson State University for 2 years, makes excellent grades. Jackson State is an all-black school. He wants to further his education, but he wants to further it at home. He wants to go to school in his home state. So he applies to Ole Miss. He applies 3 times. He's rejected 3 times. That didn't take rocket scientists to figure out if I'm a 9-year veteran in the military and I got excellent grades for the first 2 years of school and I apply to your school and you don't let me in, there might be something here, right? Well, it turns out that they're rejecting him because he's black. So how many of you know the story of James Meredith? He's the first black student to integrate the University of Mississippi. Well, thankfully, he had 500 of his fellow soldiers come and help him. You know this is a true story, right? Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, John F. Kennedy, the President, they had to call in 500 marshals, extra police, the FBI, and the National Guard for James Meredith to go to college. A 9-year veteran in the U.S. Air Force and a guy that's already got junior college under his belt with excellent grades. Now, what did we say was the definition of privilege? A status that enables access. So what did he need to the University of Mississippi? Access. What could he not get? Access. Why could he not get his access? Quick question. Was it based on achievement? Shake your head, yes, no, or maybe, to go fast. Okay. It wasn't based on achievement, right? Because what did he have? Bundles of achievement. So it had to be based on something other than achievement, which at the time was what? The system. So what did the system say? Brother, it don't matter if you're a 9-year veteran and you're a straight A student. If you're black, you cannot come to school here. Now, it's kind of fascinating. James Meredith, he's a smart guy. He went on to get his law degree from Columbia, by the way, so he did okay academically, right? Watch this. James Meredith said, I had already been to war. My president of the United States had promised me that I could go to college and I was going to allow him the opportunity to keep his promise. Right? So then James Meredith said something that I just thought was awesome. He said, here's the deal. He said, I was not at war with white people. I was at war with white supremacy. And he said, I understood that many white people could join me in the war against white supremacy. And they did. When he started out of Memphis with a march on the way to Oxford to Ole Miss, barely got out of Memphis and got shot. They put him in the hospital. The march went on without him. White and black, nearly 15,000 people made the march all the way from Memphis to Oxford, Mississippi. Now, I want you guys to see something very special tonight. Look at the date. That was James Meredith's first day in school. What is today? Thank you. Today's a day that will change the world. Can you imagine what that day felt like to him? So what could it feel like to other people if we could understand how this functions? The lady that spent the most time writing about white privilege and has done kind of a landmark work is this lady here, Peggy McIntosh. She looks dangerous, doesn't she? People think she's dangerous. She really looks like a dangerous lady. Woo! Look out for her in the street. She wrote a paper called White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And it's one of those landmark papers that was a game changer, and it kind of spawned a bunch more stuff. I've read it. I've got it with me. It's really fascinating. You need to read it. But here's the idea. The idea is that if you understand the definition of white privilege, and that definition is a status that enables access, then what I understand is being born white gave me a status that enabled access. Can you follow that? Being born white gave me a status that enabled access. So let's look at this a little bit. What white privilege is not? So I'm going to read these and we'll work on these together. I'm sorry about that. Okay? First, that all individual white people and all individual black people have personal relationship that is unequal. That is not white privilege. How many of you have very meaningful relationships with people of a different color? So that has nothing to do with white privilege. Number two, white privilege is not that only black people suffer or that white people do not suffer. How many of you know a white person that suffered? Okay? All right? So then the next thing. White privilege is not that white people do not work hard for their achievements. How many of you have read a story of some white person that worked really hard for their achievements? Right? So that's not it again. Or that white people do not experience poverty. This is one of the biggest things that I get when we talk about this, is someone, a very good friend of mine that kind of blew up Amy and I's Facebook page one day, was very upset with us because she's a school teacher, 34 years in Appalachia. How many of you know anything about Appalachia? Dirt poor of the poor of the poor of the poor. You're talking third world poverty, and she taught there. But here was the problem. She was imagining that white privilege has to do with resource. White privilege does not have to do with resource. It has to do with access. That's the difference. Let me illustrate. If you were white in Mississippi and you could come up with the tuition to go to Ole Miss, what did you have to do? Apply and do what? Enroll and pay the bill, right? Right? Or if you, those of you that know a little bit more about this history, if you wanted to go into Woolworth and buy something at the lunch counter, you get 50 cents together. If you're wrapped in my color, you can walk right in and go in and eat. If you're wrapped in a darker color, you get drug outside and get beat up. That's all we're talking about. It's not about resources. It is about access, which of course we'll talk about that in relation to resources in a moment. White privilege is not that non-whites are perfect and above accountability. White privilege is not that competition and merit are never valid. But white privilege is not that white people today are guilty or accountable for the sins of anyone else, past, present, or future. You're not guilty of anybody else's sins, past, present, or future. Now watch this. I want you to read this out loud with me together. This is not an exercise in guilt due to skin color. No one should ever be penalized due to the color of their skin. Can we agree? Can we agree? I will try it again. Come on.
This is not an exercise in guilt due to skin color. No one should be penalized.
Can we agree with that? Yes! Well, that's interesting, isn't it? That no one should be penalized for the color of their skin. Okay, let me confess something. One of the challenges of being white is we're not used to representing our race. We're not used to that. So the idea that someone wrapped in my color did something that created access for me that now puts my skin color in a position of dominance in 2015, I'm not accountable or guilty for their sin, but I am accountable with what I will do about it now. I am accountable right now. And you see, the issue is, what most of us are struggling with is, and what most people wrapped in my color is, you're trying to make me feel guilty for the sins of the past. I'm just saying that nobody ought to be penalized for the color of their skin, and we have a system that does that. Now, I didn't say we had a system that does that. We have a system that does that. All right, well, let's see what we can do about this. All right, let me put this back. How do we understand what is meant by white privilege? A status that enables access. Let's go through some stories together, okay? I think a picture's worth 1,000 years, or 1,000 words, so maybe we need a picture every 1,000 words or something like that. Let's start with Homer Plessy. Homer Plessy was a plaintiff in one of the most famous civil rights trials in the U.S. He lived from 1862 to 1925. In 1896, he bought a first-class train ticket, but it was in a whites-only section. Now, look at Homer. Look at Homer. That is Homer Plessy. You say, so he bought a first-class train ticket for the whites-only section. Well, number one, why was there a whites-only section? And all first-class seats were a whites-only section. Look at Homer. You know why they sold him that ticket. He looks, say it, white. So some lady at the ticket, hello, Mr. Plessy. He said, I'll take a first-class ticket. Yes, Mr. Plessy. Well, then he gets over there, and someone figures out he's not white. Homer Plessy is African American. But how does he look? He looks white. I think this is going to help us tonight in understanding white privilege. Because here's a black man that looks white, so what did he get? Access. He got privilege until they figured out he was. Well, that was 1896, so we got the separate but equal law out of that one. Didn't work out. Earlier this year, a few months ago, we memorialized or commemorated the 10-year anniversary of Katrina. Could you believe that? Did that seem a little weird? That it's already 10 years? How many of you are from that region of the country that was hit by Katrina? Raise your hand if you were from down in that area. Any of you? Anybody from Houston? Okay, so what happened after Katrina? Big flood of people came in, right? Okay, so a few months ago they started writing all these articles about Katrina and everything. Well, one of the articles really intrigued me. The article was talking about a place called Gulfside Retreat in Waveland, Mississippi, right down on the Gulf. Okay, anybody didn't know about Gulfside Retreat? I'll bet you don't. Here's what happened. So, back in 1923, it was illegal for blacks to be on a public beach with whites. Public beach, citizens, illegal to be on a public beach. True story. Well, Andrew Jackson, you know, the old dead president, he had an old plantation home down there. So somebody got the idea that if we buy that plantation home, guess what it had? Beachfront property. We'll buy it, which turns it into a what? A private beach. And then you can open it up for blacks to come to this beach. But they ran into a problem. You know what the problem was? They would not sell any land to blacks. But thankfully, Robert E. Jones came along. He stepped in 1923 and bought the land, and they founded Gulfside Assembly in Waveland, Mississippi. It became a haven and a resort, and eventually a place where all the leaders of the civil rights movement went. Now, one of the reasons that it was brought up in the 10-year anniversary of Katrina is because when Katrina hit, it wiped out Gulfside Retreat. And this is a big issue because this was the first in the South historically black retreat where blacks could go and freely enjoy the beach with no hassle. Now, aren't you glad that Robert Jones stepped in? Yeah. In 1920, he became the first African-American general superintendent of the AME Church. Robert Jones is African American. Yep. Who? Yeah, you see, they wouldn't sell land to people that were black. But what does Robert Jones look like? White. So they said, who wants to buy that land? There's a white dude named Bob Jones. Well, we'll sell it to Bob. So they sold the land to Bob. Why did they sell the land to Bob? Because they didn't know Bob was. Say it again. Are we getting the feel for white privilege? Why did he get to buy the land? Because he looked white. If they'd have known he was, they wouldn't have sold him the land. Everybody feeling it? You feel what's going on here? Right? So they think they're selling it to a white dude that's actually a black dude, and if they'd known he's a black dude, they would have sold it to him. That is a picture of white privilege. Isn't that interesting? There's more. Now you're on to it. This is Walter White. Okay, there's a great book you can read, A Man Called White. Okay? You already know where I'm going, right? So there's no suspense on this one, is there? Okay? Walter White, voter registration activist for civil rights. Read his book, A Man Called White. It is hilarious. He is in either Alabama or I think it's Alabama, doing voter registration. He's sitting at a restaurant. And some of the people in the restaurant, some of the men, are talking about this, I won't use the word they use, but a black guy who's signing up all those black people to vote. And if we find him, we're going to kill him. He's overhearing this. He's sitting at the next table. Why did they just not get up and just kill him right there? Because he looks white. You realize if he looked black, he couldn't have been in the restaurant or safe in the state. He became the executive secretary of the NAACP for 25 years, leading the civil rights movement. During that time, some of the most important black leaders in American history were mentored by this guy who would have been dead if he'd have looked black, because white privilege said, if you look white and we think you're white, we'll let you live. Now, are you feeling this a little bit? It's kind of surprising, is it not? How many of you at least knew some of this history? Go ahead, it's good. How many of you are like, never heard of these people? That's fair. No, come on, commit. How many of you say, I never heard of these people? Aren't you glad you're getting to know them? Because it goes further. George McLaughlin. George McLaughlin is an incredibly interesting story. Anybody from Oklahoma? Woo! There you go. All right. So George wanted to go to the University of Oklahoma. He'd already done his undergrad. He wanted to do his master's degree. And guess what? Ain't going to let him in. This is 1950. Not going to let him in. Now, he's already done his undergrad. We're talking master's degree. Not going to let him in. Take a close look at this picture. After they finally ruled that legally they had to let him in, where'd they make him sit? Why is he not sitting with everyone else? Say it again. Yeah. All right. Linda Brown, Topeka, Kansas. Linda Brown's family wanted their daughter to be able to go to a public school that was close to their house. You got to bear in mind, back there with Homer Plessy, what did they rule? Separate but equal. You realize that the United States had neither the money nor the will to carry out separate but equal. They couldn't afford it, and they knew it, but they didn't have the will to do it anyway. So the schools were inferior. Her parents wanted her to be able to go to a safe school, a good school, public school that they paid taxes for near the house. They said she couldn't go. So they went to work up the Supreme Court. 1954, the Supreme Court overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. We're getting great schools. Now this is interesting. This is in December in Washington, D.C. at St. Martin's School in 1954. Let me ask you something. What do you see on these kids' faces? They're going out to recess. Looks like kids are okay with it. So I wonder who's having the problem. I don't think it was the kids. You realize this is just a few months after Linda Brown's court case? They look like they're figuring it out. Norman Rockwell painted this famous picture of Ruby Bridges. She was in New Orleans in 1960. She integrated New Orleans schools. Now, take a good look at Ruby Bridges. Take a good look at her. Does she look black? Yes, she does. What are her chances of slipping by as a white person? Zero. It's time for her to go to school. Why does she have to have guards and the Secret Service to go to first grade? Why would any child in America have to have guards and the Secret Service to go to first grade? Yes, so they wouldn't get hurt. Why in the world would they get hurt? You see, this is the same reason that James Meredith had to have 500 guards. Because what is white privilege? Status that gives you what? Access. Pam Foreman, her dad was a minister. The day after they put Ruby Bridges in school, guess what all the parents did? All the white parents pulled the kids out. The next day, Pam Foreman's dad said, "You're going to school with Ruby Bridges." Pam Foreman was the first white child to go back to school with Ruby Bridges. This is Pam and Ruby now at a reunion. And this is Ruby speaking in February of this year at Texas A&M. I wonder about those early pioneers, not just the kids, but the parents. Are there some pioneers in this audience tonight who will start stepping across into each other's lives and creating something special that this nation and this world desperately needs? I want to take a moment and close this part with a story. Now, I know that when I start this story, I'm running a risk because I realize that we're just getting to know each other. So, again, I will ask you for some grace as I tell this story. The person I'm going to tell the story about, I don't know this person. So I'm not making a moral judgment on this person. I have never met this person, and I don't know this person. But this person told a story on national television, and as my friend Thomas Nybo, the journalist, said, I had to educate myself before I could educate others. I decided after I listened to his story that I would go research his story like a journalist. And I'm going to tell you about that story tonight. So I'm watching Bill O'Reilly. And Bill O'Reilly is one of the people who has taken a stand that white privilege is a false construct, that it's not real. And so Bill talked about this, and as an example, he gave himself. He told about growing up in Levittown, New York. Levittown, Levittown. Levittown is named after a Jewish family that owned a construction company, the Levitts, started by Abraham Levitt. Abraham Levitt had several children. One of his boys, William Levitt, went to the Second World War. When William Levitt came home from the Second World War, he told his father, they were in home construction, there is a way to mass produce homes. There is a way to build homes quickly. Now here's what's interesting. When our soldiers were coming home from the Second World War, we had three massive needs. They needed jobs, education, and housing. The Levitt family are in the construction industry. They build houses. That's what they do. And William Levitt, the son, said, we can build houses less expensively, much more quickly, help with the housing crisis, and make a pile of money. The Levitt family are known as the fathers of modern suburbia. They launched suburban America. Are you tracking with me so far? They are building houses. So here's what happened. There was such a housing shortage, and we wanted to help our soldiers, right? So they had to change some codes, build houses on a slab, all different kinds of things. Got it all solved, started building the houses. But in order to rent or buy a Levitt-built house, you could only be Caucasian. Did we send any black soldiers to war? Did we send any black soldiers to war? No. Yes. Yes. We did. So let me make sure I understand this. You can go fight for us and potentially die for us, but when you come home, you cannot live in our houses or go to our schools. Now, you see how we're coming full circle? So they started building Levittown in 1946, started building these houses super quickly. Well, you know people are going to apply, right? Because they're soldiers, so what are the folks of color finding out? We can't apply? So a lawsuit ensues. They take it to the Supreme Court in 1946, 1948. Take it to the Supreme Court rules. It's illegal for you to keep people of color from applying for the loans. However, all of the original restrictive covenants of renting and buying apply. So the way we got around it was, we already have a covenant. We do not sell these homes to anyone that's black. So even though the Supreme Court ruled it was illegal, the restrictive covenants stayed in place, so no black person could move into Levittown. Levittown exploded. So did the nearby Levittown settlement right next door, using the same schools as Salisbury, which is where Bill O'Reilly grew up. I want you to work with me on this for a minute. The Levitts claim that their policies have nothing to do with race. We're Jewish. We do not believe in prejudice or racial discrimination. Our concern is only economics, home values. It is not possible for us to reduce racial segregation and reduce the housing shortage. Well, yeah, that would be fascinating. Since you're in the construction industry and you're going to make millions from building houses, I think you're probably going to choose building houses instead of doing something about race. But now is the kicker. I want to share with you the demographics of this exact settlement, Levittown, New York. The demographics today, 94% white, 2.85% Asian, 0.5% black. The percentage under the age of 18 is 25%. The percentage of college age is 7% because their kids are all going to college. The percentage in the parenting age, 25 to 64, is 54%. There are 100 females for every 94 males. The median income is $150,000 a year, and they are 1% below the poverty line. Now, if you don't get anything else out of tonight, I want you to get this. When you have systemic systems that in 1946, legally and then illegally, but with restrictive covenants, kept out black families. It created a community today, one of the largest suburbs in America, that is still 94% white, median income $150,000, their kids are going to college, and they are landowners. Passing down their land to their children and their grandchildren. And because they would not even let people of color apply for the loan, they kept them out of a system that would have allowed them to purchase a home, build equity, and pass it down to their children. Are we feeling each other? When we have a system that enables access based on color, then I am not guilty for the Levit's sin, but I am a beneficiary of the Levit's sin. Does that make sense? So this isn't about guilt. You're not guilty for the Levit's sin. I'm not guilty for the Levit's sin. It's not about guilt at all. But it is about the recognition that we created a system where whites could be landowners and blacks could not. Folks, this was in 1946. 83 years after the 83 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. And these are soldiers who came along, like James Meredith. Are we getting a little bit of a feel for what the system was doing? Shake your head, yes or maybe. Okay, now, the question is now, whoa, what are we going to do? Okay? So, I told you I've been preaching at the same church for 18 years, right? So, several years ago, one of our guys who has kind of a weird job, he buys estates. You know these shows like where you buy like a garage full of stuff and you don't know what's in it? That's this guy. So he calls me and he says, "You are not going to believe what I got." Well, what'd you get? He said, "I bought an estate. I found a box, opened the box, and in the box, paid for the estate." And I said, "What was in the box?" Number one, he found a little Confederate soldier's diary, handwritten. About 4 inches by 3 inches. Well, that little dude went for enough money to pay for the estate. But also, and he brought it to me, he brought in an original slave document from Vicksburg, Mississippi, 1857, with 3 signatures on it. The sellers, the buyers, and the judge. And they sold a 6-year-old girl named Kate for $600 for life. I shared that with our church. One of our businessmen, who's kind of a rough Marine kind of a guy, he's a good guy, he uses the F word a lot, but he's a good guy. It's kind of ironic when he's telling me something he didn't like in my sermon, and it's F and this and F and that. I'm like, yeah, I got you. All right. But he's got a serious heart for God. He comes up after that sermon. I had the slave document in a protected glass. He wanted to read it. He's wrapped in my color. He read it. Tears came to his eyes. He shook his head a little bit. And he said, "We really did sell little girls in this country, didn't we?" I said, "Yes, we Now, he had a 6-year-old granddaughter, so it's connected. He said, he owns a company. He said, I want you to know that from this day forward, I will give the rest of my life to leveling the playing field. Now listen, that's part of what we're asking for. That is part of what we're asking for. Is that as you move out and become leaders in this country, as you are teachers, professors, professionals, you're running cities, you're running companies, God is going to use you for this. I'm old enough that I've seen what God does with people like you. And you're going to be doing it, but you're going to get out there and you're going to feel pressures and you're going to feel jealousies and envies and covetousness, just like all of God's people are tempted with. You're going to feel personal insults. You're going to feel all of this stuff. Sometimes you're going to feel like that you need to get ahead, and it'd be best if you get ahead first and then maybe somebody else. You're going to feel all those pressures, but you reject those pressures. You reject them. And you level the playing field. That's one of the things I'm asking you to do for the rest of your life. I want you to pay attention to every word you say, every picture you post, every political statement you make. I want you to pay attention, and I want you to think. I wonder if that has privilege and access linked to it. Here's the second thing I want you to do. I don't want you to have a white friend. I want you to have a black friend. I want you to get a conversation partner. Now, I got conversation partners. I got good conversation partners. But my first, best conversation partner is in this room tonight. My brother, Dr. Jerry Taylor. Jerry lived in Atlanta. God brought Jerry and I together. Jerry and I are very close to the same age. I know he looks older, but I'm slightly older. He's more healthy. Jerry and I sat in my office, and I looked at Jerry, and I said, Jerry, I need your help. I have questions I want to ask, but I don't know how to word them. I have questions I think are important, but you're going to help me find out they're not. I have questions I don't think are important, but you're going to help me find out they are. I will use words that I don't know are offensive. I need you to help me learn words that are not. You understand where we're coming from? Will you help me? And Jerry said yes. You remember that? Now that day, Jerry and I spent five hours together that day. We closed out that day on our knees in my office, praying together 15 years ago. That's how the journey got going. We were just in the process of adopting our son. I didn't know what I would see in adopting a son wrapped in a different color. All of our boys were driving in a car. They got pulled over for a license plate light being out. The only one that ended up in the patrol car was our son Jerome, and he was not driving. That was the first one. It was hard on all of our boys. I get a call from Jerome. He's over in Cobb County. He's going to see one of his mentors. Policeman pulls him over. Suspicion. Searches his car without a warrant, because if you use a canine unit, you can search without a warrant. Asks him, what are you doing in this part of town, boy? Jerome's on the phone with me. His voice is quivering. No ticket, just harassment. He goes to pick up another young man from our church, Brian Harbor, from work. Brian gets off at 12 o'clock. It's about 12:30 in Dunwoody, Georgia, North Atlanta. They get pulled over for suspicion of what? When Jerome and Brian get out, Brian's 6'10". So they handcuff them. No crime, no ticket. They handcuff them. They search their car at 12:30. That was it for me. The next day, I called the mayor pro tem of our town. We've worked with him on service projects. Our church is very involved in the community. I know this guy. I said, hey, Danny, I want you to come over by my office. He comes up to my office. I point to a family picture on the wall. I said, I want you to look at my children. Those are my children. Everybody in that picture, those are all my children. I'm going to tell you what happened last night. And then I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. Either the police chief is going to get on the phone and make an apology, or I'm going to call the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and tell them what you got going on in here. Oh, he said, Chief, go, and he'll be sure to call you. I said, you don't need to call me. He needs to call his officers and tell them to call my son. That's what needs to happen. I shared that story in Dallas at a Black Leaders Convention, and one of the men came up to me afterward and he said, you understand that you could make that call? And I did understand. The Mayor Pro Tem came to my office. The apology was issued because of the access that is enabled to me by a status I didn't earn. You kind of feel that situation? Now, one of the officers did call our son, did meet him in a gas station parking lot, and did offer a sincere apology without excuse. I am asking for you to find a conversation partner. Okay? Find a conversation partner. And when they tell you the story of their life, don't try to say, me too. Don't tell your anecdote about how bad it was for you. When someone tells you your story, no matter what color they're wrapped in, you say 3 words. You ready? Tell me more. Try that. Ready? Tell me more. And when they tell you a little bit more, like you get a little more, don't say, oh yeah, now me too. No. Tell me more. Now, when we finish that, you know what you're going to say next? You're going to say thank you. You're going to say my turn. You're going to say thank you. Okay? Because the only way you get to know people is to have a good conversation and say, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. When they finally say, ain't no more, then you say thank you. Thank you for believing in me enough that I could stumble along to this path and find out how to build